Welcome to Fast Pace, the new growth, leadership and management podcast featuring Josh Phegan and Dean Mackie. We wanted to peel back the layers on what happens in the world of fast-paced real estate agencies, from new leadership models to the management challenges we all face each day. This is about a new era in the estate agency sector. Rapid changes to business models, service lines, remuneration and growth present the greatest opportunities that we've ever seen. Sit back, get inspired, grow your skills and reimagine what's possible with Fast Pace. Every Friday, wherever you get your podcasts, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Josh Phegan Digital. Dean, this is one of my favourite topics of all time. We go to call it the great business turnarounds. And, we've seen this a lot in our Change Agents Award that we hold at Blueprint, where real estate agents come out and they tell us about what's actually happening inside of their businesses. And, what we actually always find is that these great turnarounds usually come from a moment of being pretty low, where something didn't go right, and that ultimately you then made some very different decisions on how it could go right. And a lot of people make the mistake that someone who is successful is going to be successful all the time. Now, there was a store called Masters Hardware Stores. They started in Australia. In 18 months, they went from early struggle to death rattle. They absolutely died. There's another store called Bunnings. You would think predictable success like there's no tomorrow. They actually opened up in the UK. They closed down in under 18 months because they were trying to sell barbecues for 12 months a year when you can only use them for 4 weeks a year outside. So this is a really important conversation that even the greats, in inverted commas, they have significant issues that actually go on. But you know what? It's that ability to be able to adjust, to be able to seek counsel, to use creativity, find different ways to get a business back on track and to get firing again. So Dean, let's talk a bit about it. Great business turnarounds. What are some of the fuel? What are some of the reasons why it happens? And what are some of the greatest business turnarounds that you've seen of all time that you're seriously energized and excited about?
Oh, Josh, that's a big question. But look, I think there's been some incredible turnarounds. Like even Walt Disney, if you look at in the history of Walt Disney, without going into the detail, had an incredible turnaround from something that was about to fall at the back end as well. You hear so many stories of, even Qantas, I guess we're in the same boat back in 2010, and they've turned that around. A little bit of media at the moment with Albanese, but so be it. But look, I think that any great business turnarounds, they're not just luck. I think that they're the result of strategic planning and some decisive action, and most crucially, a strong leadership. But I think that, you're right. People don't really want to make too much change if they think things are going okay. It's a bit like that whole when you're in your comfort zone conversation. And I find that people normally don't make too much change, don't want to make too much change if they're in their comfort zone. They sort of feel life's okay, But it's not until life jumps down into, or business jumps down into, this sucks, right? That people go, I want to make change.
I'm really unhappy.
A lot of my coaching with my team is to continually try and make change even when you're in the comfort zone, to try and improve out of that, because...
So strong a vision.
Yeah, and I guess that filters through into our business about saying, hey, we're always constantly trying to improve, and our team are going, but things are actually okay at the moment. Like, we know, but in the next 12 or 18 months, we need to be here, right? Because if we keep doing that, if we don't improve each day, then you're going backwards 1% each day, just about, 1% improvement every day keeps you moving forward, and vice versa. And I find that, there are so many examples of, you and I were talking the other day about Lonely Planet. They were, I love the Lonely Planet books, but Google Maps, they even went and they spoke to Lonely Planet. Lonely Planet laughed at them. They couldn't make it work. And they thought that when Google was taking all their photos, mapping the world, that this is not going to work. They thought they'd made the right decision. Next thing you know, they're out of business, right? Like these things happen, and so unless you catch it quick enough, or unless you're staying ahead of the curve, unless you're trying to innovate, sometimes you get caught out when it's way past the point that you can no longer make the change to continue to be successful. I.e., you go at the back end. So I think it takes leadership and planning to catch it before it happens. So I think if you're looking at what are the root causes of a business going down the tubes, there's a whole handful of things, right? There's obviously, it could be anything from financial issues, too much debt, poor cash flow, cost management's not under control. So that'd be one bucket where people sort of can get themselves in trouble. They might have operational problems. Their business might just be clunky and have too many friction points and no quality control. And it's not innovating. So they're just sort of doing the same, and they can get themselves caught out. Or they could be just making some strategic mistakes, like, they're not positioning themselves correctly in the market. They haven't launched products correctly, or
product market fit's wrong.
Yeah, or
Purple Bricks in Australia, great example.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, they just executed poorly for this market. Doesn't mean that the consumer didn't like that, but it just was
really lucky they didn't turn up in 2020.
You know what? I think 2% market share in the short period of time that they did was an outstanding result, considering, right? Look, that said, I think, anything can go wrong if you just think that whatever you did somewhere else can work elsewhere, right? And they just didn't adjust for the Australian market. But the technology made sense, and the consumer was saying that we like this. I guess some of the other things you can make mistakes on when you're growing in real estate is if you get mergers and acquisitions wrong. That can cause a lot of headache, take everyone off track, cause all sorts of problems. It can that can cause issues, and then of course leadership. I think if your leadership's off track, where you're not making the right decisions, or you don't have any real vision, or you're not communicating properly, all of these things can lead to a downward spiral. I think all of them together leads to disaster. Individual parts of it on their own are resolvable. So I think that the trick is to identify what are those root causes of decline that are causing you problems which you can then go to work on.
So I love this about focus and awareness. Now, I was taught this very early on by a mentor who said to me, hey, Josh, with focus, you'll see that there's a pedestrian crossing and you'll just cross it. But with awareness, you'll see there's a cement mixer truck coming that can't stop. And so okay, how do I have a bit of awareness? But if I've got too much awareness, I've got no focus to actually get across the road. Well, so I'd have to have appropriate mixers, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because it's only then that you can sort of do an analysis to say, well, what do I need to fix here, right? Because I think sometimes we can also jump at shadows. There's a lot of times I hear murmurs of this or that or whatever. And when I dig into it, it's sometimes there's a life to it and sometimes there's not, right? And I think we can easily lie in bed thinking about the 99% of things that don't happen, or we can try and get clear about what is that 1% that's really actually having an impact here, right? Because that could be the single most important thing for you to resolve.
So do you remember when McDonald's did salads?
Yeah.
How did that go for him?
Man, I'm not a McDonald's guy, but I do get it, right?
Yeah, and with the interesting conversation is people do we just want to buy the burger, man?
We're there for McDonald's. That's their market position, and they love it.
And they went back to it and record profits ever since. And so that's that whole idea is that sometimes you can adapt in a way the customer doesn't appreciate. And this is a bit of a fad as opposed to a long-term trend, right? And so when I see great business turnarounds, what I see? People who take stock for a few moments, they stand back and they get perspective about where they're at. They have a quick look about what's actually happening in market. They reassess what they're doing. Then they're in a position that they get really, really focused on doing one thing and doing it exceptionally well. And there's the great story with Steve Jobs. It was like 27 different, product lines at Apple, and he reduced it to 4.
Yeah.
And then it became incredibly profitable. There's the story of Robert Iger, who was the CEO of Disney at the time, and he's standing there and he's got his niece and nephew, and the niece and nephew didn't know any of the characters on Main Street. How come you don't know Daffy Duck? Why don't you know Bugs Bunny? Well, I don't know any of them. And so then he went on this purchasing rampage and went and bought all of these different characters that were in different movie houses and brought them in, like Pixar as an example, and Toy Story, and Woody all of a sudden showed up. And this is the interesting thing is that, you can just have missed it because you had a formula that worked so well for such a long period of time, but you don't realize that things are actually evolving on the outside. So it is important to actually have a little bit of awareness, but be able to focus that strategy. And then also to knowing where to place your big bets. And that's what I think that I've loved about what I've witnessed with you over the many years that we've worked together is that you're the sort of person who will find a big bet and go all in on that. So you know what, we're going to go and do this and do it really well. Like the first ever when you brought out, at the time it was McGrath TV, and how focused you were on digital and video across every single listing was an absolute game changer for its era. And the interesting thing about what you did with the first having professional presenters to present high-end property was a game changer in terms of video. You now have a look 10 years down the track, and that's seen as being mainstream. But at the time, it was absolutely a high-risk strategy. It was a high-cost strategy. But literally, it was about driving market share and momentum. Is that what it actually takes for a bit of a turnaround, that you've got to be prepared to put a line in the sand and go all in on something and back yourself in to get there?
Yeah, sometimes. I don't think that we were in a situation where we needed to turn things around at that point. I think we were market leading, but I think that we wanted to continue to innovate because we see that the consumer was consuming more video content, right? And we figured that was a great way to separate ourselves from, equalise and separate from our competition. And, we brought in at that time, it was a big risk to bring in our own production team, to come in and be our full-time video.
I remember that.
And people were thinking you're mad, but I think that when we did it at scale, I think the impact was tremendous. We've put in some similar changes right now on another product and another strategy, and going in all in has been very difficult and challenging. But I'm seeing, I had an agent come through yesterday and said, hey, I wasn't seeing it 3 months ago, but man, I'm actually seeing it now. I'm actually winning more in the lounge room right now with this strategy than I ever thought I would. And so you start to see the green shoots, right? But sometimes you've got to go all in. And I'm not saying that we needed a turnaround position. In fact, it's probably placed a lot of risk on our business.
Sure. But what's interesting in that story is the belief.
Yeah.
And for any great turnaround, you've got to reinstill the belief in what it is that you do and why you do it and why it matters, right?
Yeah, and sometimes that's not going to suit everybody, and sometimes it's going to affect your engagement levels, and it's going to cause some rocky periods and all those things. But I think sometimes you've just got to be prepared to go, you know what, if I'm going to do something, I'll put a new strategy in place, I'm going to invest in the innovation, I'm going to think about how I can expand it, I'm going to think about how I can, it can be a tough decision, and not all stakeholders are going to be across it, and it can actually mean that, but if done correctly, I think over time people go, I do get that. And it can actually go the opposite way where you sort of have this J-curve effect and you can go through this change and then you come out the other side and go, hold on a minute, we're actually building some momentum here. And then you can come out the other side and it can actually propel you to a whole nother level of success. And, but it doesn't always go according to plan either, Josh. So, look, I think though, if you're in a situation where you're struggling, or your business needs a reset, you've really just got to focus on a couple of key buckets, right? What's going on with your costs? How are you going to improve your efficiency? Refinance your debt, right? If you need a new strategy, what does that look like? Invest in some innovation. Perhaps it's some new markets. Your leadership's going to be crucial. Clear direction for people. Involving them and helping them understand why you're making such big decisions, I think would be quite crucial. And communication. I think that I've made mistakes with not communicating enough at the outset of something and things can get off track. But if you do take the time to get the communication right, address concerns and make sure people have all their questions answered, it builds a lot of trust. And I think that if you're doing that and you get your team on board and you get everybody syncing and moving in the same direction, then, at the end of the day, you can pull yourself out of just about anything, provided the numbers work, right? So I think sometimes things can get worse before they get better, and sometimes it's just part of the journey. So I think if you're prepared to adapt and, make progress, you can turn anything around.
When I work with people on the 30-day intense, what I've often found is it's the smallest commitment to a very simple behaviour that gets a very big difference in result. Call session a day. 2 call sessions a day.
Yeah, that can turn.
3 call sessions a day keeps Josh Phegan away. It's that simple. And, you do that, you got a great business.
Perfect.